Good evening and welcome back to 31 Horror Nights. It's October 25th and tonight's movie is Coherence. And with a title like that, you know you're in for a trip. This is an indie movie from 2013 that appears to blend together a lot of different genres: psychological, sci-fi, thriller, horror. The trailer for this movie is pretty vague, and I've heard people say that this is one of those movies where it's better if you go into it knowing as little as possible. Apparently, the long and short of it is that there is a group of friends who are hanging out together on a night that a comet is supposed to pass, and when it does, weird things happen. Just out of curiosity, I looked at the director to see if he did anything else I knew, and he actually has, but it was completely unexpected. He worked on the story for the movie Rango, a movie that I personally have never seen, but I've heard nothing but good things about. Apparently, this is one of those mind warp, complicated, confusing movies, so I'm gonna have to focus all 7 of my brain cells to pay attention and try not to miss anything. And I have ADHD, so pray for me. I'm gonna go watch it. My reaction to Coherence was pretty similar to my reaction to Cube. I kept thinking, I really should like this more than I do. I'm gonna give it the same rating, an 8 out of 10. It's creative and really clever, but it just didn't all fall into line for me. And I'm talking about enough so to warrant giving it a 9 or a 10. It's still a very good movie. There are 8 characters in this movie. They're all friends. It's 4 straight couples, so 4 men, 4 women. From pretty much the beginning of the movie, weird things happen, but things really start to go downhill when the power goes out when the comet comes over. And when they go outside to look around the street, there's another house like 2 blocks away that has their lights on. The acting in this movie is pretty good, but with the characters, there are a lot of them, and this movie is relatively short. It's less than 90 minutes long. So only a couple characters really get enough time in the spotlight to really develop. The main character, the one that we follow from beginning to end, is a woman named M, and I liked her fine. All the conflict in this movie stems from interactions between the main characters and the people in that other house in the street that has their lights on. I would like to emphasize that this movie is really clever, and there's a lot of good moments that connects things that didn't really make sense at the beginning with something later. And it was not nearly as difficult to follow as I was expecting it to be. But I think one issue I have with this movie is that there are so many things going on at once that they don't really focus on anything for very long. This leads to some of the moments in this movie feeling kind of rushed. Like, there's a point where one person forms a theory about what's happening based on something they found, and nobody even questions it. They all just immediately jump on, okay, this is what happened. This is what is happening. How are we going to deal with it? What are we going to do now? Comparing it to Cube again, these both are very high concept movies where they take an idea and they build everything else around that, and while I can appreciate that, obviously, I gave both of them good ratings, they're not what I'm looking for like my favorites. I think a smart idea and a good premise can only get one so far, and both Coherence and Cube were very, were limited by its premise, by its idea. There wasn't much they could do outside of it. So to that extent, Coherence is about as good as it realistically could have been considering what it was about and the way it was made. I'm being vague on purpose because if I were to tell you about how it was made, that would sort of lead to spoilers. And like Cube, I would sum up Coherence as it's a very creative, very clever movie, but it's not something I'm gonna keep wanting to go back to. And now let's finally talk about some spoilers. 2 people in the group go over to the house with the lights on to see if they can ask for a phone, and they come back later than they were expecting, and they have this little lockbox, and the way that they said that they got it was very vague. The 2 stories that each of them gave kind of contradicted each other. But anyway, the box contains pictures of all of them that have numbers on the back and a ping pong paddle. And also, one of them says that when he looked inside the house, he saw their house. The interior and exterior of the house are the same. The same dinner was even set up. And later on, they find a book about quantum mechanics, and this leads them to form the theory in the scene I was telling you about earlier, very quickly come to agreement on the theory that the other house is them, but it's an alternate reality. It's a different timeline. Something about the comet is affecting the space-time continuum to make those 2 timelines come up together. But then even more things happen that bring that into doubt and make things seem even more complicated. They'll leave the house, then come back, and some things about the house and the people in the house are different than they remember it when they left. They talk about this zone in between their house and the other house that's like black, and they guess that when they cross it, it's like being put on a roulette wheel is how they phrased it, and they're getting plopped into a different timeline, but that works both ways. So when they come back, they're not returning to the house that they left. And with all the different timelines running at the same time and people coming and going from the houses, everybody gets mixed up. They tried to combat it by, for one, using that lockbox. They wanted to come up with something random, something that isn't likely to happen on 2 timelines at once, so they each roll a die, get a number, and write that number on the back of one of their pictures, and just in case those over 5 million different possibilities wasn't enough, they also put in a random object, and that makes M realize that she entered a different timeline when what that object is keeps changing, or the people disagree on it. A lot of bad things happen in the house that M ends up in, and she decides that she wants to go on to a different timeline before the comet passes, and she's stuck. So she leaves and finds a different house that's a lot happier. The problem is there's already another M there, so she has to, get rid of her double. And she thinks that she succeeded in killing off her double, but the very final part of the movie is realizing that there are now 2 M's in this timeline, and it's the next day, the comet's passed, they can't switch again. It's very interesting looking into how this movie was made because it was filmed without a script. It wasn't even filmed with the actors knowing the story. They were just sort of given notes about what they're supposed to be doing in a given scene, and they're just in the house, and it's all put together in editing later. Something that's a huge achievement. That's not something I would have guessed by watching the movie, but I don't feel like that was entirely necessary. This is a pretty bare-bones movie. Not only was there not a script, the entire movie is shot in this one house, and it's the director's house, so it's sort of like Paranormal Activity. And like Paranormal Activity, this is a testament to how far creativity and cleverness can get you, even if you don't have a lot of money. I don't know, man. Just the fact that I'm watching such a smart movie and I'm not loving it, it makes me feel some kind of way. But I still do like it a lot, though. It's very impressive, it's executed very well, and the idea is brilliant. But it's not really a film I'm gonna keep going back to. Well, that's it for today's episode, and we only got about a week left. We're nearing the end. I'll see you guys tomorrow.